Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Omega Directive. And I am Alec Peters.
I am Jay. And we are going to be talking, I think it's fair to say, Secret Hideout's Desperation. As they try to claw their way in with Skydance and to keep this contract. So, for anybody that doesn't know, should we just talk about the contract that Secret Hideout have?
Yeah, let's do that.
So basically, initially, Alex Kurtzman created this company, Secret Hideout, after working with J.J. Abrams on the Kelvin line Star Treks. And he got a deal with CBS Studios and Paramount to produce content exclusively for them. It's a little bit like the Bad Robot deal that they've got with Warner Bros. That has produced nothing. Or virtually nothing, and cost $500 million. So Paramount pay a fee, and then part of that initial deal was to produce Star Trek Discovery. Following that, they then got an extension, which was about 5 years, and basically, because they couldn't come up with anything other than Star Trek, they now just focus on Star Trek, and they were sort of contracted to do like 5 shows. They were supposed to be having like 5 shows active at the time, so obviously a couple of animated, Picard, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds. That current deal ends in the summer of 2026. So at some point in the next 14 months, 15 months, they either need to sign a new deal or they will be losing their deal with Paramount, and basically they will not be producing any more Star Trek. I am told, though, that the current deal does mean that anything actually in production at the time, and I'm told that's the words used, production, so not pre-production, not planning, not anything. It's actually basically got to be filming. If something is filming at the time when the deal contract runs out, the contract allows for sort of an extension to complete anything that's, and that's assuming no new deal is superseded, it's something. So say they're halfway through doing season 5 of Strange New Worlds, they would be allowed to complete it and would be paid to complete it. So that's basically the deal at the moment. Whether Skydance are willing to give them a new deal is the question.
Yeah, yes. And I know you did a video last week, I think it was, where you said that they're giving Alec Kurtzman the chance, which I find shocking, based on Section 31, and based on what you reported was the reaction of Skydance to Section 31.
Oh, apparently they were furious.
Which they should be, because it was shit.
Well, apparently as well, I'd have heard since is they actually over at Skydance hadn't really seen much about Section 31. And I suppose you could say, well, why would they? Because they don't own Paramount yet. But they've not been privy to it a great deal. So pretty much the bosses at Skydance saw it when we saw it. Which I find really surprising. I find quite shocking. But if that's true, no wonder they were pissed. So, no wonder they were very, very annoyed. You get a Michelle Yeoh, an Oscar-winning actress, and you put that crap show together. I would argue, if you can't do something properly, don't do it. And they didn't have time to do it properly.
Yeah, and and so you wonder, it's almost like they shuffled Section 31 off to some other team that they hadn't worked with before. Because
I don't think it's not that. I think it's just that they rushed it. I think they were planning to do a series, and then they thought, oh, we can't do a series now because Michelle Yeoh's too busy and she's got a thing. Paramount offered to let her out of the contract, and she said, no, I'd love to do something with your show if we can. So they went a mini-series. And she went, yeah, okay. Then she got the Avatar gig, and they said, right, okay, no, I'm not gonna have time to do anything following once that starts. So they went, right, we'll do a movie. And she says, right, okay, basically you've got 16 weeks to produce a movie. And instead of saying that's not possible, we can't rewrite an entire script, we can't do that, we can't do that, they went, okay, we'll make it happen. And that's why we got Section 31 the way we did.
Yeah. It was interesting because this past week I was watching the Decon podcast, Connor Trenier and Dominic Keating, they interviewed Brian Fuller, and he talked about how he got into the writers' room at Next Generation. It made me think about what's happening with Secret Hideout.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, who is in that writers' room? Who is driving the and, you know, as much bad press as Rick Berman got, you know, for all the different, you know, all the different dictatorial things that people complained about. The fact was he bought into Gene's vision, and he tried his best to adhere towards what Star Trek was. And you just feel, especially with Section 31, that there's no one there at Secret Hideout who really grew up and is inculcated with the whole Star Trek brand ethos.
Yeah, you can even argue that Rod Roddenberry isn't.
Well, Rod Roddenberry has nothing to listen.
Yeah, just because he's his son doesn't mean he's.
Yeah, and also Rod Roddenberry has his name on as executive producer because he sold Roddenberry Enterprises to Paramount. Paramount wanted him out. His name and Trevor Roth, his buddy, their names are up there. They're not doing anything. They're not driving the ship. They're not even advising, as far as they basically got the credit.
Apparently they advise on storylines.
I'm sorry?
But apparently they do advise on storylines. Apparently storylines come across their desk, and their job is supposed to sort of go whether something Star Trek or not. But even Rod Roddenberry's own words, he said it kind of implied that they'd only sort of said that's not very Trekky once or twice. And you look at Discovery season 1, definitely Picard season 1 and 2, and you got to go, I'm sorry, you were looking at those scripts and at no point did you go, this isn't very Trekky.
Right.
What were you drinking at the time? Because you weren't concentrating on what you were doing. So yeah, no
disrespect to Rod or Trevor, both of whom are good guys, but that was a figurehead thing. I mean, literally, CBS or Secret Hideout, whoever the case may be, thought they would earn goodwill if they put the Roddenberry name up there. Well, Rod's been spending the last 30 years scuba diving, and he's a Star Wars fan, not a Star Trek fan. You know, yeah. So and frankly, most of Star Trek fandom has no clue who Rod Roddenberry is.
Given Roddenberry Entertainment executive producer role and a role within thing that does sort of clean up the intellectual property a little bit.
That's what it. Yes, because they got Roddenberry.com. Paramount got that back, so they cleaned that all up. Absolutely, that's why they did that deal.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So where we're at the moment, basically, is that I've been told through the people I speak to at Skydance and Paramount that Skydance are willing to speak to Secret Hideout. They're willing to basically say, right, you come to us with a couple of shows. We want to produce 3 Star Trek shows. We don't know what they are at the moment. That might be Academy. Strange New Worlds apparently will end after season 5. So they basically need 2 other shows, or 3 if Skydance decide not to continue with Academy, which is obviously possible. We don't know. We have no idea what we're getting with Academy yet. So so they basically said, look, we want to do 3 shows. Pitch. You've got till Christmas. Pitch. And one of those shows better be Legacy, because that we think that's the future of Star Trek, and we'd really like to push forwards with that. Obviously, I've talked to you guys about this before, and I've talked to you about this, Alec, a couple of times, that won't be with Terry Matalas. So, or at very least, it won't be with Terry Matalas if they produce that in the next 2 to 3 years, because he's busy with Marvel, busy with Disney. He's got lots of projects on the go. I've been told Jonathan Frakes would actually direct and would basically showrun with another person. I don't know who the other person is, but they would sort of do that. That was always Secret Hideout's plan. And don't get me wrong, they were always planning to do Legacy. If the sale hadn't have gone through, I'm told they were going to announce it at the end of Picard season 3 and go into production. So they would have had 3 shows going at the moment, basically. It would have been Academy, Strange New Worlds, and the first season of Legacy would have gone into production. Basically, it would have been about now. Or no, it would have been in a couple of months when Academy's done.
And so why didn't they?
Because Paramount basically said we're not greenlighting anything else because the sales gone through. So they're not allowed to greenlight anything, which is why they're basically rushing with Academy and Strange New Worlds because they already had the green light for those. They already had those budgeted. Basically, Paramount have said, look, and they're doing this pretty much across the board. They're not really green lighting anything new because they've got new owners coming in and they don't know what the new owners want to do. The new owners basically as well have made it very clear to them that they will be cutting a lot of fat out of Paramount. They will be selling studio space. They will be selling some of the smaller businesses, etc. So, yeah, there has been conversations between Skydance and Paramount about the shows, and they've done. I said to you guys a while ago, they did a review of the big franchises and things, and also they did a massive review of just literally the buildings. Literally, Skydance engineers went around and looked at the studio spaces and did like a big survey. That's the stuff that's been going on. But until Skydance actually have their feet under the door, they can't actually sort of agree budgets, agree costs, agree these sorts of things. So they're doing what's already been greenlit. And they're basically rushing to get Secret Hideout. So Secret Hideout are rushing to get Strange New Worlds season 4 and 5 into production as quickly as possible to get them done, just in case they don't get the contract. Because if they don't get the contract, obviously that will end. So Paramount are happy for them to do that, but they're not going to greenlight something like Legacy, just in case Skydance come in and say, no, we don't like it like that. I hear as well, Skydance don't particularly want them to start with Legacy, because if they start with Legacy, the Secret Hideout this is, and then they, over at Skydance, decide not to give Secret Hideout a new contract, they can't continue with Legacy. Because anything, obviously Star Trek is owned by Paramount, but anything that then Secret Hideout create within Legacy that's original and that they come up with, basically, they kind of own. So Legacy would have to, they'd either have to have some sort of agreement with Secret Hideout and pay them to allow them to transfer to a different production company, which happens quite a lot. Companies, the shows change production companies halfway through. I think about this with Stargate, for example, as the show I know really well. They went through a couple of different productions companies and they're allowed to continue, but there's a deal between them. So they'd have to have that, and there's no guarantee you can get it. Or you would be stuck with it. And Skydance see it as like, well, that's potentially the future of Star Trek kind of scuppered. So we do it with Secret Hideout with a new contract, or we wait, we get rid of Secret Hideout, and then we do it.
Okay.
So there's no problems.
So here's my point. Hold on one second. This is an important point.
Go.
Okay. So I'm giving the Go Frack Yourself Award to the CBS knuckleheads who basically gave the keys to the kingdom to Secret Hideout. I mean, here we are at the same time they're suing their biggest fans over Axanar because it's too good. They're giving the keys to the kingdom to some guy who has no particular interest in Star Trek other than as a business proposition.
Yeah.
Is not, and they're basically saying, yeah, and anything you create, yeah, you can have the IP that you create. That's fine. Won't worry about that. The effects of the future. It is monumentally a bad business decision that CBS and Paramount made. I mean, you wanted to hire Secret Hideout and you wanted to change, of course, with Rick Berman, it was all done in-house. You want to change the paradigm, you change the way you're making Star Trek and outsource the whole thing to some outside production company, fine. But what knucklehead in the business affairs department thought it was a good idea to give them the IP to actually, I mean, how easy was it to say, no, dude, it's all ours. You're just making it for us. And anything you make, we own. Because you know what? I've got a document that I make sure now that everyone signs when they do something on our fan film, any creator, meaning any writer or any director or anything, just because I don't want some idiot like we've had in the past claim our IP. How easy would it have been of that? But they didn't do that. And that's why they're in the position now that they have to work with Secret Hideout to continue Star Trek Strange New Worlds or to do Legacy or anything.
It's basically like this is what basically Amazon have just gone through with Barbara Broccoli and Bond. They've had to pay her over $1 billion to make her go away because of the deal that was created, and the Broccoli's was the executive producer, etc., and the creator, and he owns element of the IP. They own element of the creative control of Bond. So they had to pay for Barbara Broccoli to go away. There would be a similar problem if they wanted to continue Legacy. They would have to pay Secret Hideout to go away, basically. Yes, it's pretty standard. But I mean, a lot of TV shows, what they do is they bring in a production company, but they basically do it in-house. So it would be CBS producing the show, say this was Star Trek, but basically the production company comes in and supports and creates, does the scripts and blah, blah, blah. But they are hired by Paramount. Paramount didn't do that. They basically went, we will give you a fee, you produce Star Trek. That doesn't happen very often.
For good reason, as we see.
Yeah, not with big franchises anyway. It happens with smaller shows and things,
sure,
occasionally, but not with big franchises,
no.
Not with important franchises. It doesn't happen. They would do it internally, and you would maybe bring in executive producers that have their own. I mean, an example like Penguin and a Parker and The Expanse. The Expanse is owned by a company called, I always get this wrong, Alcon. It's a company called Alcon. They own the rights, which is why it was able to shift from Netflix to Amazon quite easily, because Netflix never owned the rights to it. Alcon produced the show, they sold it to Netflix. Netflix didn't want it, so Alcon sold it to thing. But there were 3 or 4 production companies involved in that. Penguin and a Parker and a couple of others. But none of them have any creative control of it because it was solely owned by Alcon, and they had an incentive to not sell it. The new production company that the creators, S.A. Corey, obviously that's not his real name, it's Ty Frank and Ty Abrahams. No, Ty Frank and Daniel Abrahams. They've created a new production company with Naren Shankar, and they're trying to now buy the rights for The Expanse back from the TV and movie rights back from Alcon. But at least you're dealing with one person there, sort of thing. That was a TV show that came from nothing. Alcon bought the TV rights and they ran with it. This Star Trek was not that. Star Trek wasn't a new show that a production company went, look, we've just bought the rights to this novel and we want to create it and we're going to sell it to you. Star Trek already bloody existed, and for some reason that will defend me, I can only think that the Secret Hideout and Kurtzman have something on the bosses over at Paramount, because how did he even get the job? He was a writer on the J.J. Abrams films. I think he produced the one. How did he talk them into this deal? I just don't know. They weren't.
Yeah.
I know Paramount aren't in a great shape financially, but they still pay for it. It was still hundreds of millions of dollars they gave to Alex Kurtzman to produce Star Trek for them. It's not like, and then it's all filmed at CBS Studios. So it's not like they were like, we haven't got capacity. Amazon do this occasionally. We haven't got capacity to do it, so we'll let someone else do it. And that way it gets done. We haven't got capacity to make it. Oh, no. Paramount actually made the show with CBS Studios, but just let somebody else write it and do all the legwork sort of thing. I don't know why they did it. I don't know why they didn't hire Kurtzman if they desperately wanted to do that, rather than just give him, like you said, the keys to the kingdom. Why did they just give him Star Trek? Why did they do that?
And listen, and I don't know the whole story with Brian Fuller, and what happened there. I mean, because he was on track to be the guy. He was on track to be the showrunner. But look, he had just, I think at that point he's rolling off a Hannibal, right? And so which was amazing. And and you've got Star Trek royalty. He's proven showrunner with a successful show. Makes a lot of sense, but to then roll from Fuller onto Kurtzman, wow, you take away all the Star Trek, institutional knowledge, I'll call it, in corporate terms, that would be your institutional knowledge. That's someone who's been there, done that in the company. You get rid of that and you bring in basically an outsider, because the Kelvin universe, that's a couple movies he worked on that, it's not being part of Star Trek. It's being part of a JJ enterprise. But not denigrating that at all. It's a separate thing. Is my point.
Oh, I will. I'll denigrate. I thought they were crap. No, they weren't. I really like the Kurtzman movies, but I like them as just action sci-fi movies. It's, as long as I don't think of them as Star Trek,
Right.
I don't get too angry.
But that's the same thing with Discovery. This whole school, this whole J.J. Abrams, Alex Kurtzman school has certain they have certain things that they do, and adhering to what the fans want, is not one of them. And again, that's not a value judgment. That's more an objective look at what they're doing. A little different with JJ when he was doing Star Wars, because he's a Star Wars fanboy. So his Star Wars movies were were basically the biggest fan films of all time. But the problem with Star Trek is you got to get Star Trek. I actually think successful Star Trek is harder to make than successful Star Wars, because it's the genre. It's a lot more cerebral. It's a lot more understanding the culture of Star Trek. You put a great action movie together and put it in the setting of the Star Wars, and you're good. Mm-hmm. Not that Disney is great at that, but so that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with it. But it does seem though that right now what Secret Hideout are doing is they're desperately trying to develop something that's going to excite Skydance. We're hearing loads of rumors. We've obviously got the sitcom, which we could talk about in a minute and try to get our heads around that.
Oh God.
We've got something that they're trying to attach William Shatner to, which is and they said that was in development. So a lot of people, when I dropped that news, a lot of people went, well, maybe that's Academy. Maybe he's going to be like a hologram or something. And I'm like, no, because he specifically said it's something in development. Academy's in production now. So I suppose they could have meant season 2, but the way he said development sounded like it's a new show, something we don't know to me. I may be guessing, but that's what it sounded like. We've also got potentially a Janeway live action that she's sort of announced that they're in talks, discussions about. So that's 3 shows that we know about, plus Legacy would be 4 shows we think they're trying to sort of put together and develop to a point where they could pitch it to Skydance to save their contract. It smacks as a Desperation to me.
Right. Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you there just from a fan's perspective. It's like, I don't want to see a 93-year-old Kirk, and I don't want to see I don't know how they're going to fit, Janeway into the grand scheme of things. I think this is getting back to what Hollywood is. The problem with Hollywood is regurgitating success because you don't have the intellectual horsepower to create something new and dynamic and interesting. And I think that's the wrong approach. I just think it's the wrong approach. Listen, I don't agree with what Kurtzman did as far as redoing canon with Discovery and with Strange New Worlds. But I think you can come up with good, whether it's Legacy, whether it's Strange. I love Strange New Worlds, but Prodigy was a good product. Lower Decks is a great product, right? Those are new. Those are both. You can say, well, Star Trek did animation, 50 years ago. Those are new, interesting ways to look at Star Trek, and they're both very successful. And whereas Discovery and the first 2 seasons of Picard were kind of a dud, this is what happens in Hollywood. They say that was a dud. Let's go back to what we know. Let's bring back Knight Rider. Let's bring whatever the nonsense is. And Transformers number 83. We don't need Transformers number 83. We need something new and interesting. And there are people in Hollywood pitching those ideas. The challenge is Hollywood is risk averse. They don't want to take those challenges on. And this is what this is, as I've said before, no one in Hollywood ever lost their job by saying no. And just the same way, they feel it's safer to go with something that's proven. Oh, William Shatner, he's proven. He's Star Trek royalty. Yes, let's just bring him back. He's 93 years old, dude. I mean, God bless him. He's an amazing 93. I hope I'm as good.
I don't know how he's even still alive. Never mind as thing as he is. And man, the man drinks, smokes, and eats like he's 20. And
I know.
incredible.
But does anyone really want to see a 93-year-old fat Kirk? I mean,
well,
I don't.
I can't imagine it'll be part of a series. I think they've pitched him an idea to maybe it's the Janeway series they're trying to pitch him on, just to try and get him to do some sort of cameo or one episode or something. I don't know, but
I think the interesting thing to do would be to do the AI thing with him, to do something interesting where something that
they did that little short thing, didn't they, last year? Was it last year? It was what was that, Spock's funeral sort of thing, done with AI. That was incredible, to be fair.
That was great. So interesting, because I heard one of the big Star Trek influencers, I forget which one it was, did an episode on that and why he didn't like it. And it was all really valid reasons why he, he's like, look, it's just a tag on, and it's a fan film. Let's just be clear.
Well, it's a tag on, and there's no story to it. It's a
story.
It's a goodbye. It's a It's a love letter, whatever. It's not. I mean, there's no speaking in it, from what I remember. Not like I say. So it's just it's like a postcard.
And that's not not denigrating it. It was. I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
It was very.
But it is what it is, right? It's not even an idea for a show. It's just a proof of concept. Hey, let's do this stuff.
Exactly. It's a proof of concept, and and that's what it was supposed to be. And I like say a wave goodbye to those characters as well, maybe. But it was very clever, but it didn't really add anything. But I'd like to ask you about the sitcom, because generally speaking, the comments I get are, what the hell are they thinking? That's insanity. What are you on about? And I've always argued, and don't get me wrong, people love or hate Lower Decks. I loved it. I know you did it. I know you loved it. I thought it was a love letter to TNG. I thought it was funny as hell. I thought it was really clever. But because it was animated, I didn't mind that it was a bit silly. I didn't mind that it was fun. Right. Even though they've argued it's canon, but I didn't mind the humor and stuff because it was animated. So it was separated a little bit.
Right.
How the hell do you do a live action sitcom based within the Star Trek universe that would be canon and doesn't have the luxury of being animated, so we can sort of go, yeah, but come on, it's animated.
I'm with you. Listen, I'm with you. I think this gets back to, if you had a Star Trek person in charge, we're in the writers' room going, guys, we got to come up with 3 new shows. What are we going to do? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Legacy is your easy one. That's a no-brainer. Legacy is a slam dunk, right? If the right writer's in, it's going to be hard for anyone to screw that one up. Oh, let's do a sitcom.
No, just stop you there quickly. If anyone can screw this up.
I didn't want to say that. I knew you were going to.
Come on. They did Section 31. They can screw Legacy up.
That's, getting back, the thing that they have to do, Kurtzman would have to do for Legacy, is get the right writer's room. And he hasn't had a consistent Star Trek writer's room for ever. I mean, and I think you and I kind of agree on Discovery. Like, if Discovery wasn't Star Trek, I'd be like, oh, I'll watch that on Sci-Fi Channel. Oh, there's a new science fiction show. Yeah, I'll watch that. Oh, hey, it's pretty good. It's not Star Trek, right? Yeah. It's like you're just messing with the Star Trek.
Like mushroom transportation. Okay. I'll go with that.
Yeah.
Sci-fi.
Yeah, we're just going to blow up all the starships with dilithium. Yeah, let's just do that.
Yeah, let's do that. But as long as it's not Star Trek, which is supposed to be a little bit more realistic. It's supposed to be science fiction with big science sort of thing, or at least try.
Right. It's always been about, even if we're making up the technobabble, we're doing our best to ground it in reality. I always remember in yesterday's Enterprise when Data's explaining how it could happen. He goes, "Oh, it's a remnant of superstring material," and I'm going, "Hey, at least the casual observer has heard about string theory. It's like at least you're trying, right? You know, instead of saying, "Oh, it looks like some magic mushrooms got out," and yeah. So, but if you're in that room and they say, "Okay, idea number 2, let's do a sitcom," you would be. And if you had 6 Star Trek people in there, if you had Brian Fuller in his prime and Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor and Ron Moore, they go, "Are you out of your fucking mind?"
Yeah.
You know, go down to Star Wars at Disney. Maybe they'll take that in. It's just not a serious idea in a Star Trek world. But as you said, I think you hit it on the head. If you said, "Let's do an animated comedy with Star Trek,"
because they've done it. Worked.
Tell me, okay, tell me why you want to do that. That's interesting, right? So I totally agree with what you said. You laid it out perfectly.
Do you know where I actually think this has come from? I think Tawny Newsome, that does the voice on Lower Decks for the character of, now forgotten her name. Mariner, thank you. She's a very talented comedian, and I think they recognise that, because obviously she's in the writers' room for Starfleet Academy. And she seems to be one of the main people in the writers' room, all trying to develop behind this sitcom idea. So she's a comedian who is very funny, very talented writer, and they've gone, right, how do we use Tawny Newsome? Right, what do you think? And let's do a sitcom. And who knows, Kate? Who knows who came up with this idea first? But apparently, Kurtzman is in the writer's room because he thinks he's a comedian as well. So it's just this insane business model that they have at Secret Hideout that basically says we can do any genre within Star Trek, and we can do a sitcom within Star Trek, and it'll work. And people loved Lower Decks, but it was fucking amazing. That's the difference. But you can't do anything within sci-fi. It's got to be sci-fi first.
Yeah, I agree with you. Someone said, "Hey, would you want to write for in Hollywood? Is that something you want to do?" And I go, "No, first of all, no, I'm not that good. I'm good at Star Trek. And that's because I understand Star Trek. So I get Star Trek. I get the stories. I get the flow. I understand it. I understand characters and what those characters are. Your first officer in this. I get it. I can do that. I can't do, if you say, "Hey, we're going to do this show. Do you want to come?" I go, "That's not me. I don't have that skill set." But the people at Secret Hideout haven't realized that they don't know how to do Star Trek. Yeah, maybe there's some good writers who have done other things. But you need the good writers who understand Star Trek, not some guy who comes in and because what's going to happen is that person is not going to understand what a Star Trek fan wants. And if you give me that, well, we're not making the new show for Star Trek fans, I'm going, well, then who's your audience? All the people that aren't Star Trek fans? I got news for you. They already know whether they like Star Trek or not.
Kurtzman telling the British guy in Section 31, I've forgotten his name as well, never mind, that basically Star Trek is dying because Star Trek fans are too old. And I'm like, I'm 47.
And I'm 64. So look at it, almost 20 years between us. And I guarantee you there are people in their 20s who are Star Trek fans now too.
Yeah. But I mean, that was the argument for why they basically had no Star Trek in Section 31, because they were trying to attract a new young audience. Why they did Discovery, why they did Stranger. And I'm just like, if you do a good show, it doesn't matter what demographic. Like TNG, to me, was a Star Trek show. I don't think they aimed it specifically to any demographic. They went, we've got a Star Trek show. We're going to make the best show we can make. And they made a sci-fi show, and it happened to be massively popular. They did it again with DS9. They did it again with Voyager. Really worked. Enterprise, nah, but even actually look back at it now. Dear God, I look back at Enterprise now fondly. I'm like,
you and me both.
Made freaking sense. They weren't aiming at things. They might have had things within the show to sort of titillate and, aiming at things to try and, Wesley Crusher was probably there thinking that, that might draw in a slightly younger audience. We'll put Deanna Troi in a very skimpy outfit to appease the men, even though nobody else wore a uniform like that, but she did. They might have done things.
Oh, by the way, she never looked better than when she was in the Science Blue costume.
Proper uniform. She looks
right.
amazing.
She looked great in that costume. Not that shit that she was wearing the first.
She looked like a dolly in the first season.
It was awful.
It looked awful. Her big hair and everything. But anyway, very beautiful woman, and they knew it, and they tried to use it, sort of thing. But it never felt like it was aimed specifically at anything. They were just trying to make a good show, and they knew they had to sex it up in a few places here and there, and they had to do character, having a show where your first thought is, right, this is aimed at this demographic. I'm sorry, but you are doomed to fail it's immediately. And so Chris Carter was talking about an X-Files reboot. And in the statement, he actually said this is going to be the most diverse cast possible. And there was only 2 lines to the statement, basically, when he announced he was going to do X-Files. And I'm like, the fact that diversity, like I say, I believe in DEI, and I think diversity is really important. And
sure,
it's not what we're not going to talk about politics, but it's not what a lot of these right-wing people or left-wing people say it is. It's just about trying to be inclusive. But if you're starting a show and that's like the first thing you put in the statement, I think you've immediately got a problem, because for me, you're coming at it from the wrong direction. The first thing should be, what's the show? What's the story? And then later you go, actually, we should make sure we don't hire just white men. Right?
Which is honestly what we did with Axanar 10 years ago. When I was writing the script for Axanar 10 years ago, at some point I said, oh my God, my whole bridge crew are just white people. I said, okay. I said that, because I hadn't thought about that. So I went back and we took the pilot and I made the pilot European. He was we made him African American, but we made black, a European, African European. And I said, we need some diversity. And I even asked Claude, who's our resident European. I said, okay, name this guy. Give me a good backstory about what, and then we changed. I said, okay, we're going to make this character a female, and we're going to, because I said, we need diversity because that's what Star Trek is. It's one world. It's one world government, 300 years from now, it's the United Earth, all different types. And we're even in a time before they integrated the crews. So it's all Earthlings. Let's make sure we represent. So I had to affirmatively think about that. Now, I would never go out and say in a statement, oh, Axanar is all about diversity. No.
It's not what it should not be the priority.
No, it is.
I appreciate that's been an accusation lumped at X-Files. Like it was lumped on Friends as well. They say, look, where the colour, but it was a slightly different time. And I don't think, again, it was done on purpose. I think they just hired who they thought were the best people at the time.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We want the best people. I don't want people hired because of colour or gender.
But that is what the equity and portion of it is. I say DEI is not affirmative action.
No.
DEI,
it's not quotas. It's not that sort of thing either. But yeah.
DEI believes in meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. So anyway, but
we'll get comments.
We'll get comments. I think your point is well taken. They need to. If you're talking about X-Files, you should be talking about the great stories and are we going to see the aliens and what Yeah.
Well, I would want to know: is it a remake? Is it a reboot? Is it a continuation? Is it a thing?
Right.
Okay, that's great. But what are you talking about? And it hasn't happened anyway. So yeah. Oh, not yet anyway, but I think they announced that just before the writer's strikes, and that's a different world since the writer's strikes.
We'll bring back Space Above and Beyond.
They keep trying. Disney keep trying.
Do they?
Again, they were pushing for it just before the writer's strikes. During the writer's strikes, though, I mean, there were lots of ideas thrown out there, and I kept hearing about different things. You mentioned Knight Rider earlier. I heard that they were trying to do a Knight Rider, Airwolf, $6 billion man, and possibly and initially the A-Team, but that got dropped. But it was basically going to be, they were going to have an Airwolf season, a $6 billion man season, a Knight Rider season, and then it would be like a Marvel-esque thing where they would all come together and maybe have a TV movie. And AI would be the core of the storyline. You know, AI in Kit, AI in Airwolf, AI in the $6 billion man, and there'd be some sort of that would be intertwined. And this was pitched and trying to go in development. I've not heard anything since, but during the strikes, executives are sort of like, got literally nothing to do. So like Knight Rider sort of thing. But A Space Above and Beyond was looked at as well. And they're about doing a full remake. Which
I loved it.
I think they looked at what happened with Lost in Space to a degree, not as much, but Battlestar Galactica, and they're like, Space Above and Beyond is a series that could work. We had a 5-season arc story plan. We only got past the first season, it didn't quite work. But now it could. We could do something with it now that could be exciting. And but again, it's, as far as I know, it's never got past the decision stage. Apparently, there was a slight issue with the rights. Apparently, they're not 100% certain who's fully got the rights. But yeah, it's a different world though since the strikes. And going to your point about so many remakes, so many reboots, so many things. I have some sympathy for creators that they do some a passion project. They do a story they think is amazing, and they want to sell it to a studio. And the studio's going to go, great, but the question to me, okay, so why should we buy this? And they haven't seen the show, if that makes sense. They can read a script, but you can't get the full vision from that. It's not like, that's why they do pilots, isn't it? You do a pilot and then you go, okay, maybe. They don't really do pilots anymore, not for streaming at least. So they've got to sell it to somebody. So attaching a big name actor is one way, or basing it on a novel that was popular is a way. At least it's a tag, isn't it? It's that hook. You've got to get people to want to watch the damn thing. I don't mind remakes and reboots if they're done well. I don't like sequels generally, but a remake, a reboot, it's fine. If it's done well, and if it's something like Highlander, can't wait to see Highlander. I think it's going to be amazing. I think that's a film that desperately wants a remake. But I want new stuff as well. And we do get new things. We do get new shows. But even if you get a new show, like The Ark has just been given a 3rd season, but it's The Ark from the creators of Stargate, from the creators of something. They still have to put that hook in to go, do you remember that other show you liked? Please watch this new show. And I do have sympathy for that, because how many good shows over the years have come out and bombed because nobody thought to watch it? Firefly is probably the example that jumps to mind for me. It was because people saw the trailer and thought, I don't fancy it. So it got cancelled very, very quickly. And then later we realised it was one of the best sci-fi shows ever made. But we realised too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's, to us, really, we need to, as fans, as sci-fi people, we need to be able to look past and give shows a chance. But nowadays, especially with streamer services, when those shows cost $100 million a season, they don't give them a chance.
Yeah.
Star Trek: The Next Generation, first 2 seasons were crap. Stargate SG-1, first season wasn't great.
Yeah.
But it blossomed, sort of thing.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. They don't get a chance.
All right. Well, listen. Thanks for the update, especially. I cannot wait to see what comes out of, or maybe I can. What comes out of Star Trek in the near future here. But let's hope that Legacy does get made, because that would be. I think all fans would.
Yeah. I think we'll know by Christmas.
So that would be.
I think we'll know a lot better by Christmas what's going on.
So, well, I am Alec Peters. You can get me on Axanar.com or the Axanar YouTube channel, and or Alec at Axanar.com if you want to email me. Jay, where can people find you?
Most of my videos are on the Tech Impulse podcast. Where there'll be links in the description, and I appear on Sidetrack quite a lot, which is my original channel that I started, and the links are on the description. You can get in touch with this if you want to.
All right, everyone. We will see you in the near future. In the meantime, my friends, live long and prosper.